Hello everyone. Bernard Socks has just woken up. It's lunchtime. He's completely nocturnal now that the weather's decent, and he runs in and out of the house all night, and then he sleeps all morning, wakes up for lunch, and then sleeps on my lap all afternoon when I'm reading. If I'm lucky, he'll come and doze on my lap while I'm writing in the morning, which is quite awkward, and I twist my back, don't I? I have a drawing board that I rest my laptop on, and then I have to sit sideways on the chair to accommodate this one. And he's quite heavy because, as you see, he's quite a large cat, aren't you, Socks? Anyway, I hope everybody's well. It's Monday lunchtime. I've been writing. I've done my, I think, 1,500 words on this Doctor Who piece that is nearing completion now. So I'm almost ready to deliver that and to send in the files. And then I can return to my thriller, which at the moment is called Anything You Say. And it's a kind of coercive control domestic thriller, but I won't say much more about it. I still have the last chunk of that to write, the kind of climax of that to write. We'll see how it goes. I've also been outlining what I hope will be some more sagas, a new trilogy for Elsie Mason. Because yesterday, in the middle of everything else over the weekend, quite a quiet weekend of reading and a bit of socialising, I did come up with a new character for the Elsie Mason books. Somebody who would see the sequence of novels move into the kind of 60s and 70s as the 16 streets start to decline and people move away. And I do have a character that I want to write about. And it was one of these very odd moments that you can't make happen. They just happen when they do. And I had the sensation of a new character arriving. It sounds so crazy, in my head. She really did. And I could suddenly see what her story arc was going to be. And I won't say anything else about it because it's still very malleable and protean and still being made up inside my head. Very, very odd sensation. A wonderful sensation, actually. And I think maybe brought about by actually relaxing. Sitting in the sun, sitting in the garden, in just enough shade, reading other people's books and just enjoying myself in the kind of quiet way that I like to enjoy myself, which is, you know, with piles of books and occasional friends about and some nice food. And I think keeping things quiet and still like that is the way that you make ideas come to you. You can't push them. I always remember back at UEA, lecturing there, in the later years of that for me, about 2002, when Michelle Roberts and Patricia Dunker joined me on the MA. And Michelle, it was all new to her, the university lifestyle and lecturing and teaching, and the way that all the time seemed to be filled up, in that it was the kind of era when you had to justify everything you did. You still have to. Worse probably now. But she did say that you can't pin down a writer's life as simply as that. You can't just say, I will sit down for these hours and write. That's not how it works. And she said, what about the time necessary for daydreaming? And that was the term she used. And I think she said it in a meeting, and you know, people rolled their eyes, the kind of more serious members of the faculty who, you know, obviously couldn't write for toffee. They wouldn't have known writing if it had slapped them round the face. But they knew how to fill their own timetable in order to look busy. That's what academics do. Looking busy, seeming busy, complaining about being busy, busy work. And Michelle was quite right. You have to have time to dream, for those things to come to you. And yes, I think you sit down, you write and you write and you burrow into writing and you make yourself write. But I think you have to sit still sometimes and let the ideas steal upon you. You play, is it Grandma's Footsteps with your characters, with the characters that might make it into your stories. They creep up on you. And sometimes they do it in dreams as well. And that's something I remember having conversations with both Michelle and Patricia about the power of the unconscious and the way that works on writing fiction. You have to let things suggest themselves. You can't engineer them into existence. Anyway, that's what I'm thinking about again today. And I'm pushing at writing down these ideas about this new character and the terrible tribulations that she's going to go through. In some ways, writing these sagas, because the genre is a slightly melodramatic one, with lots of things happening all the time, you put your characters through the absolute mincer. You do terrible things to them. And you have to relish this whole business of doing awful things to your characters. But I think that's true of every genre, actually. And of course, if you're writing something like a thriller, even worse things are going to happen to your characters. So you have to be quite heartless and brutal at times. Isn't that true, Socks? He's gone back to sleep. So what else do I have to tell you? I finished reading my the saga that I was reading, the Joanna Noye novel, The Little Penguin Bookshop, which turns out is the first in a series. And it was one of those delightful moments where you just go and check to see if there's going to be a sequel. And yes, there is, but not until the beginning of next year, which is a long time away, because I really love this first book. I love the characters. At first I thought, oh, is this a bit straightforward, perhaps? Everybody was so nice. And they kind of are. The characters are just nice. You have the young woman, is it Cassie or Carrie? I'm terrible with names, who has a brother who goes into the Air Force. She has nice parents who run a stationer's and sweet shop. And she gets this idea to open a stall on the station platform of the railway near where they live. It's 1939, and it's the beginning of the Second World War. And she puts out racks and racks of orange penguins, and green penguins being the detective ones, and blue ones being the biographies. And it's at the beginning of the whole penguin paperback explosion, when people turn to reading to get them through the dark days of the war. And you get a lovely sense of that, of people dashing to buy these books, as well as other magazines and things. In the times of paper rationing, I've got some 1940s penguin books, and they're on this very thin paper, smudgy. I've got some issues of new writing that came out at that time. The John Layman magazine that was published in book format. That's why it meant such a lot when my first story came out in a series called New Writing, published by Vintage, because they'd taken the title from that John Layman series. So it felt very special to be under something that paid tribute to those books at that time. Anyway, there's other great characters in the Joanna Noye book. There's the woman who runs the cafe, who's a bit rough, I was going to say, a bit quick-tempered, and Ruby, the girl that works for her, who seems a bit common at first with all of her makeup and her dyed hair, who misguidedly, it seems, writes letters to Eric, the boy who's in a German prisoner of war camp. And who else? The terrible man who runs the platform, who turns out to be really horrible. He's the villain in this, as much as Hitler is. And then there's, oh, I forget her name, but she's she turns out to be a posh girl. She turns out to be a girl from a very posh family who's kind of ran off to live amongst ordinary people. I'm hoping that she turns out to be some kind of literary lesbian. That's what I'm hoping. But I don't think so. I think they're going to marry her off to the brother. And then there's the boyfriend as well, who goes missing in action, Mike. So they're all kind of fascinating characters, and it feels like the beginning of a series with them all jostling around, and it feels like we're going to follow them right through the war, which is great. I hope there's 2 books a year. I think it might just be the one. But I do have a zest for reading sagas at the moment. But I've moved on to, as I said in my last video, to Travis Baldry's next novel. So I'm in the world of Viv, the orc, the green orc with tusks, who is about to be involved in running a bookshop in this seaside town. It's so funny. 20 years ago, when I started doing the Brenda and Effie series, people were had to be persuaded that they wanted to read something about the Bride of Frankenstein running a B&B. They thought it was the most bizarre idea in the world, a guest house run by a monster and all her friends being witches and monsters and solving mysteries. And now, of course, that kind of thing is everywhere. The Brenda and Effie books are still available from Snow Books. We should have a push on them. We should be able to sell them now, I suppose, now that the world has caught up with them, perhaps. And I think that's where I'm at. I'm reading 1 book at a time. Can you believe it? At one point, I had a shelf full of about 17 things I was reading, dipping into a chapter at a time, which can be quite dizzying, and it makes your progress quite slow. And I ground, not to a halt, but I was moving very slowly through, I think, the month of March, when I had 4 really good books on the go at once. So it felt like no progress at all, but I really got caught up in the life of Leonora Carrington and Jerry Potter. And what else was I reading? Anyway, whatever it was, I was really stuck on those books, enjoyably so. But there are piles and piles and piles of books all over the house, and I need to crack on with them all. And that's just enjoyable. I haven't been book shopping for a long time. I've picked up 1 or 2 things here and there, charity shops as we've kind of breezed through, but I've not been to an actual book shop for quite a while. Things arrive in the post, of course. This morning, although it's not here, it's in the next room, I got a David Rees novel that I didn't have. David Rees was a 70s, 80s gay writer in the UK who published a book called In the Tent, which was kind of for kids. And I read that in my, I don't know, when I was about 10 or 11. And it was the first time I read something with gay characters in. And I almost died of shock. It was so exciting. He also wrote books for adults. And I guess they're books for teens, the ones in between. And the one I got today, The Colour of His Hair, I think it's called, is one that I didn't know about from the later 80s. I wish I'd known he'd continued writing at that point, and that I'd been buying them as a student. It seems ridiculous that I wasn't aware. I suppose we didn't have online shopping. You couldn't just do a search and find out what people had out new. Back then, in the 80s and 90s, you were very much reliant on what the bookshops you went to physically actually stocked. And gay books, there weren't gay sections in bookshops until the mid-90s, I guess. And certainly nowhere in the Northeast would have had David Rees on the shelves, I don't think. I was very lucky to have Aycliffe Library, which was a tiny library, but they did have a copy of In the Tent, in the children's section, in 1981. It was a kind of, looking back, a real bold thing to be doing. And I guess it's a lifesaver, isn't it? It was a lifeline to me. Because, as I've said before, as a gay kid, especially growing up somewhere like that, in a time like that, you're making the whole thing up for yourself, based on, you know, nothing. You couldn't find anything out. books were the way forward. Anyway, I'm going to go now, and we have to get some shopping in. And then I want to settle down and read for the rest of the afternoon. But I'm going to say goodbye, and here's goodbye from Socks as well, who's fallen back asleep on the bed. I'll see you again soon in the next episode. Goodbye.